Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Lilies and Tomatoes. Tonight we are going to be planting a 5x5 garden. If we have not met yet, my name is Quincy Adams and I want to help you grow some of your own food in a small space on a budget. Let's get started. Okay, so if you're sitting there asking yourself, what is a 5x5 garden? Let me explain. A 5x5 garden is a garden that consists of five 5-gallon containers, and that's your whole garden. This is not a thing. This is not a term you're going to find if you Google it. This is something I made up. But basically, what the point of a 5x5 garden is to get some food going on a small scale, because there's nothing like messing up on a big scale to discourage you from going any further. But also have it be like small enough that it's manageable for newbies, but big enough that it's going to be worth your time. So if you only have like one container and you're not getting a whole lot, you might be like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. So 5 containers that are 5 gallons is the right size to get you enough food to make a meal or to like have something every week or so. It's a good starting place. It's a good size. It doesn't require that many resources. You should probably be able to get it started for between $50 and $100, less if you use kitchen scraps. But if you're starting from nothing and you need to buy everything, this is an affordable like approach to it. I recommend fabric grow bags. I love using these. I started using these a couple years ago, and I'm transitioning a lot of my garden over into them because the plastic containers get brittle in full sun, and my garden is in full sun now when it wasn't before. So before, when I had plastic containers, they would last for years and years and years. Now that I've got my garden like south facing full sun, the containers break down after 2 years, and then they break into like really sharp shards. So as I replace them, I'm just replacing them with fabric bags. They work better for me. They're easier to manage. They can't be overwatered. I've had problems with that in my garden before, where we have periods where there's just so much rain that the water fills up the container and the particles in the soil reorganize so that all the big ones clog up the holes in the bottom of the pot. The water can't get out, and the water's just sitting in there. And then when it keeps on raining, all of the small particles of your soil, like the perlite, wash over the top, and then the roots of your plants come out and your plants topple over. It's crazy how much too much rain can like affect a container garden, and it can happen quickly if you have a lot like fast rain. So that's why I like fabric containers, because the excess moisture comes out the sides. They can't drown. If you use a saucer like this, this is a 14-inch serving tray that I got from Dollar Tree. These things are fantastic plant saucers. So I just set the whole thing on top of the saucer so I can keep a little bit of water at the bottom so it doesn't dry all the way out, but it doesn't drown either. It's like win-win, the best of both worlds. So another thing I like about fabric bags is if you got a 5-gallon bag, it's big enough to grow most things that you would want to grow at home. Understanding that in a container, a plant is going to be limited in how big it can get based on the size of the container that it's in. But 5 gallons is a good size to grow most things. If you don't need 5-gallon containers all at the same time, but you bought them in a 5-pack, you can roll the sides down of your container, and now you've got a 3-gallon container, which you cannot do that with a plastic bucket or any other kind of bucket. It's perfect. So that's why I like 5 gallons and the fabric grow bags, and I've seen them. I've been getting them on Amazon lately. They've gotten cheaper. And I have not had any quality issues with mine, but I have seen some of them are a little hit or miss with the quality. So make sure you read the what is the word? Read the reviews if you don't know the company. All right. So for the purposes of this, why we're doing this right now is because I'm writing a book, about growing a 5x5 container garden. And so I'm planting a 5x5 container garden as a test garden to go along with the launch of my book, which will be coming out soon. For this test garden, we're going to be growing a pepper, 2 tomatoes, some bush beans, and onions. These are the bulbils for Egyptian walking onions. They're my favorite kind of onions. You can't mess these up. All you have to do is plant them. And instead of setting seed, they just grow more bulbs at the top. So they set a flower, and then the flower turns into little bulbils like this that I just showed you. And then you plant the bulbils, and you get more onions. I mostly use the leaves, but you do get small bulbs from them if you keep on growing them. I'm not going to make you guys watch me plant all 5 of these, but I'm just explaining what you can do with a 5x5 garden. So 2 tomato plants, a pepper plant, some bush beans, and some onions. You can, I mean, aside from the lettuce, you can make a salad. You can do a lot with that. So this is just a good size for that. But tonight we're planting this sad little tomato plant. Based on the color of the stem, I'm pretty sure this is one of the black varieties that I started, and it's looking rough, so we're going to plant it deep. So if you're doing this, if you're new to gardening and you don't have a whole lot of stuff, don't feel like you have to go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff. Like, what you really need is the containers. I highly recommend doing a saucer underneath. It doesn't have to be plastic. It can be, I also use those foil onion rack liners for some of my containers. And those work well. See, this is a healthy plant with healthy roots. And, or you can use any kind of just, anything you can find that's not porous. What you want is to keep the bottom of the container from drying all the way out. That's it. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Whatever you got. You can use a different kind of container as well, but like if you use something like a laundry basket or a milk crate, I've done those. Those require some kind of prep. So if you don't already have the materials needed for the prep, that can make it more expensive to get started. With these, with a grow bag or a plastic pot, if you're buying a plastic pot, then it should be at least 12 inches across the top. And I don't know, probably a solid 8 inches tall. That'll give you about 5 gallons. So now that we've got this tomato plant planted, you definitely want to get potting soil. Don't mess around with any other kind of soil, because there are all kinds of soil, but they're not all going to be good soil for a container. So just don't look at anything else. Just get potting soil. That's what's best for containers. If you want to get fancy and mix your own soil, you can do that. But I do not recommend that for newbies, because it's a mess and you have to shop around for a lot of different amendments, which also gets expensive if you don't already have something. Generally, like if you want to get some kind of fertilizer, something, it doesn't matter if it's organic or it's traditional. If you don't know what you need or what your plants need, then I recommend getting a balanced fertilizer that's going to have the same percentage of nutrients by weight for each of the N, P, and K. So this one happens to be a 10, 5, 15. So this is just what they had. I'm not super picky about my fertilizer, but if you care about organic, then get you some organic fertilizer. If you're not sure what kind of plants or what your plants are going to need, just get something balanced that's going to be like a 5x5 or 10, 10, 10. That's a good fertilizer for a lot of things. In the case of tomatoes, I recommend highly that you get some lime. You can get it in a small bag. These bags are generally not that expensive. And amend your soil. And if you're planting in a container, you can just put your amendments right on top. And then they, as you water at the base of the plant, the amendments will seep into the soil. You don't, if you're mixing it into the soil, then you could potentially have, and you don't need a lot of this. One, I think this is a 7-pound bag, 6.75 pounds. One bag like this will last you for several years for tomatoes. Most things that you're going to grow in a small container like this, most things don't need any kind of amendment, so you can save money that way. If you don't have the money for amendments, buy things that don't need amendments. I recommend amendments for tomatoes. Put your this has lime in it, and it raises the pH. Tomatoes are susceptible to blossom end rot, so that is caused when the calcium is not getting to the right place in the plant. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have calcium in your soil. So don't freak out if you see some blossom end rot on your tomatoes. Just make sure you're watering well. Normally that is caused by uneven watering. I'm just going to say that thing. So if you want tomatoes, get the lime. If you're growing a bunch of things like peppers can get blossom end rot too, but if you're growing like beans, you don't need any kind of amendment for that. You just get the containers. I recommend saucers and a little bit of fertilizer. And then after this, you set up all 5 of your plants and just water them. You definitely, if you're newbie, want to get plant starts from store. So you're going to get something that's about this size or this size and plant it. This will save you time. This will get you closer to a harvest faster. If you want to start from seed, then that's a lot of effort and it's going to take longer. So if you start with a plant start, you're going to get something, you're going to be like 6 to 8 weeks faster along in the process and that much closer to getting a harvest from whatever you bought. So there's that. And then after this, you really just need to water this, check the soil, just put your finger in the soil down the 2 knuckles and see if it's still moist down to the 2 knuckles. If it's not moist, water it. If it is, leave it. And that's pretty much it. You just put this in a sunny spot. 5 containers this size are gonna take you only like a couple minutes a day to maintain. If you grow things that are gonna get tall, you are gonna have to trellis them up. Something like a pepper is not gonna get that tall in a 5-gallon container. Beans, bush beans, they don't need to be trellised. If you want a smaller tomato, make sure you get something that's a determinate versus indeterminate. Indeterminate will grow indefinitely. Remember it that way. If you're getting beans, make sure you get a bush bean. That's going to be a shorter plant. And then this is not going to take up that much space. Like this 5-gallon container, it's about 12 inches across. So it's almost 1 square foot. So if you're thinking about square foot gardening, you have just under, it's like 3/4 of a square foot with this container. So you just want to think about, like, if you're trying to go by square foot gardening says 1 square foot for a pruned tomato. Square foot gardening, a lot of times they say 1 pepper per plant, but I generally go with like 2. Bush beans, 9 per square foot. So in this container, I would probably do 6 or 7 maybe. But probably do them in a circle around the outside and 1 in the middle. So however, but spacing wise, you want to try to give them as much space as possible in between. So just think about that. What else would be a normal thing to grow? If you're going to do something like a cucumber, make sure you do a bush. If you do not have the space to trellis. If you're doing cucumbers, you can do 2 plants in a 5-gallon container. So, and if you're doing something like an onion, I'm not trying to make these onions big, so I'm going to plant probably most of these in a 5-gallon container because I just want the leaves. That's how I eat them. But if you're trying to get more, then you would space them out better. Focus on things that are going to give you to start, that are going to give you the fastest harvest. So something like beans, if it's still summer, you're going to get beans in about 60 days if you go with bush beans. If it's closer to fall or it's early spring, then you want to do things like lettuce and peas. Lettuce is going to give you a harvest fast. You can get 4 heads of lettuce in one 5-gallon container. Or if you want a bigger head, then you can do one in the center and then it'll get really big. But just if you're new to gardening and you're looking for a good place to start, you want to make sure that you're not wasting your time, but you're not going to waste a whole lot of money or fail on a big scale. 5-gallon containers is the best way to go as far as I'm concerned. And it's my humble opinion after gardening for almost 20 years in containers. You can grow a lot in containers as long as the container is big enough. But if you're not sure what you're doing, soil is expensive, y'all, and it's heavy. So you don't want to go out and you get excited and you're like, okay, I'm going to do 5 containers, but I'm going to do 5 25-gallon containers. That is a lot of soil. A lot of soil. So this is a good amount. This is something that you can go out and get everything. You can get 5 plants, 5 containers, 5 saucers, soil, and a little bit of fertilizer in a weekend. Set up your container and have a garden very quickly, very easily, without making a